Hello everybody, I'm Maria Petrashko, the agency of TV News. The people demand bread and circus, but this year our neighbors are likely to have circus without bread. Hundreds of thousands of European farmers in Poland, Romania, Bulgaria and so on are protesting, throwing eggs, manure and claims at the authorities. The harvest is supposed to grow, but there is nowhere to put it, and there is no place to store it. That is labor and waste. And all thanks to solidarity with Ukraine. Remember the high-profile grain scam, or the deal, when the Western countries were terribly worried about the Ukrainian grain. That's how to take it out under the bullets of the military conflict. After all, Africa will starve to death without the Ukrainian millet, which, by the way, is not so abundant to feed Africa. So Africa survived. But it never saw any grain from Ukraine. For some reason, it remained on the European market. Duty-free imports turned out to be cheaper by 70% than in Romania. Naturally, it was actively sold out, despite the lower quality. But the European one is left to rot. It turns out that the grain deal works. The truth is in the style of Biden, somewhere in the wrong place. Instead of saving the starving Africa, they saved the chiefs in Ukraine. Kiev has earned more than $8 billion on the duty-free sale of cheap Ukrainian grain in Europe, and more than 417 million euros of losses was counted by farmers in Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria and Slovakia. And according to the tradition of European solidarity, they began to actively hint to the European Commission that it would be nice for them to add compensation on this occasion.
Poland will receive compensation from the EU, this time the losses caused by the import of Ukrainian grain. This is almost 30 million euros from the EU, plus a second amount from the national budget. In total, about 280 million Polish zloty.
It's not clear whether the European Commission will be able to compensate all the losses, and all the losses amount to almost €500 million, what the European officials know perfectly well. However, is how to impose restrictions. So they decided to ban the import of grain, fruit, vegetables, wine, meat, and so on from Ukraine for the time being. Bulgaria and Romania are already planning to join the boycott. From the high stands, everyone of course supports the Ukrainians, but in reality, everyone has their own interests. By the way, I personally think that a boycott from Poland, that almost borderless neighbor, is a dangerous bet for Kiev. Today they stopped being ceremonious with trade, and tomorrow it may be the same with the territories. After all, the Polish authorities do not even hide their claims to Ukrainian lands. Anyway, naturally the Kiev sellers didn't like the ban on imports from Ukraine. They have to pay something for Zelensky's wife diamonds from European boutiques. Kiev first accused Warsaw of violating the agreements, and then he claims that the European protesters are Muscovites. They say they are not Europeans, but the Kremlin sent them to throw manure at European officials. That would be a lot of fun, but Ukrainians are not laughing. The American edition Polito writes, Ukraine may see another Maidan. Unfortunately, Zelensky was unable to replicate his TV role as president of the people in real life. His support at one point dropped to 11% after he fired the reform-minded prime minister, formed his government of friends and former business partners, and achieved nothing in his anti-corruption campaign. If the crowd is used to the fact that it's able to influence the government and change it, we can expect the repetition of the Maidan again and again. It's unlikely that a healthy person could expect reforms from Zelensky, but everyone seems to be tired of the Ukrainian leader, including the other forces of the Kiev Reich, Western curators and Ukrainian people. The question is who will be the first to set fire to a Molotov cocktail against the backdrop of the loss of such a profitable loophole for the already dead Ukrainian economy, duty-free trade with the European Union. But after all, everyone had a logical question: how did Ukraine manage to pull off such a masterful food scam, thus cheating the European Union out of duty-free trade? In fact, the Ukrainian grain is American grain, and the United States, when it wants to sell something, sells it by any means, be it their own shale gas or grain grown in Ukraine. Judging by everything that is happening, they haven't heard about fair competition in Washington. But something else is interesting here. The European Union is unable to say no to the states. The European Union will not interfere with the grain deal. It's just that Warsaw is still clearly aiming for the place of the engine of Europe, Germany. And against the background of the hype with farmers, it tries to play a card of its own. If you want our support for Ukraine, pay for it. And Brussels has already allocated 13 million euros. What they will actually be spent on is not our concern, but against the backdrop of the suffering and loss of ordinary Europeans who support both the Ukrainian Reich and the fugitives of all kinds. Those who were elected to take care of people clearly took care of their own interests.